Hi, friends. Welcome to this week's American Mussar Community
Hey.
Gathering. This was recorded on the second, the just the eve of the second night of the Passover Seder. So we are going to do kind of a special Mussar Passover gathering tonight. But first, we'll begin the way we always do with a short meditation. So I invite you to relax and close your eyes and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold, and inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you go at your own pace of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth and holding. If thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them pass, like watching a car move past on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Hello, Guy. Hello, Carolyn. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, just as our icebreaker tonight, I thought that I would start with just a little bit of a check-in to see if you had a Passover Seder last night. How was it? Who was there? I actually have not had one yet. I have one on Saturday night with the B'nai Torah community, and another one on Sunday, or I'm flying back to the Bay Area and I will be with my Havurah. So I would love to kind of hear about yours and how it went.
Well, we'll be having our Seder on Sunday.
Hmm.
We can get together with our kids.
Great. Fabulous.
We had a Seder last night here with great friends that are big, have become like family. And
Mm.
then on Friday night, tomorrow, Shabbat, we're going to have our second Seder
Mhm.
with the family, which is small. My son and his girlfriend.
Mm.
So that's what we're doing. And we had a wonderful time. I think when we all sat down last night, we felt the heaviness of the moment of the
Mm.
world, and I could feel that. And but we proceeded, and it was a lot of it was very much joyous and meaningful. So it was just one of our best ones. I don't know. The food was great, the conversation,
Mm.
the whole thing. So it just felt good. It was like we needed it somehow to be together in community. So it felt good.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue. I think that is kind of one of the maybe the only real cure for, when the world is so difficult and challenging is just being with the friends and family that we love and being together. Anyone else care to share an experience of their Seder or anticipated Seder? Barbara, yes.
I had a Seder last night with friends that live in a different part of the state where I lived about 20 years ago. They invited me to a Seder at a point where I had no Seder to go to. My family was too far away for me to be able to travel.
Mm.
And they started inviting me every year. So I've been going there for 30 something years to have a first night Seder with them. And it was just nice to just go and have a good time and not think
Mm.
about anything else and
Yeah.
just sit and talk and eat. And it was very relaxing. It was a good night.
Yeah. Thank you, Barbara. It is so special to be with people, for 30 years. Wow, that's incredible. And I think for an occasion like Passover, it's, it isn't a night like other nights when we get together with our friends. There is something about the ceremony and the regularity that I think adds to the experience. At least that's how it is for me. Um, Anyone else care to share anything about a past or anticipated Seder? I'm actually going to try, but the Seder on Saturday night is going to be the first time I'm leading a community Seder. And I heard this really interesting idea from Rabbi Lex Rothberg on the Judaism Unbound podcast, which I know I've talked about before, and I suspect some of you listened to. And he talked about the first cup of wine, the Kiddush, how it kind of sounds like Kaddish. And he said it wouldn't be an inappropriate time to say Kaddish. And he explained it, and I thought about it, and so much of the holiday, and I think what makes it special, certainly for me, is thinking about being at my parents' Seder and my grandparents being at the Seder and and talking about our ancestors, our spiritual ancestors in Egypt. So I think it was a really interesting idea that I'm going to incorporate in some way, either with the Kaddish and or some discussion groups at each table, just about who are the ancestors that we're kind of inviting in and feeling the presence of. Just curious what people think about that. I know it's not something I planned on, but since we had a little bit of a shorter check-in, I'm just curious what people think of that idea. Yeah, Sue.
I love that. I love bringing the memories of the ancestors in through the that's a wonderful. I never wouldn't think of that, with the Kaddish, Kiddush Kaddish, but
Yeah, it's a really
also,
creative
eh,
idea. I thought it was
yeah, I love that creative idea. I also love like when I set the table for last night, I brought in all these ritual items that reminded me of like my mother-in-law who just passed away. She embroidered the matzah cover. And
Hmm.
my mother gave me the Seder plate, and my dad brought back the china from Germany. And
Hmm.
so they were all at the table, even though they weren't physically present.
Hmm.
And so I like those kind of
Hmm.
memories.
Yeah.
And many people, we personally don't have memories of big Seders when we were growing up because we didn't have that. But I know many people do have a lot of memories of family members that are no longer here at then being at the Seder. And I think that's a really nice reflection.
It was a custom at one of the Seders that we used to attend when I was growing up to sign the Haggadah,
Oh,
so that you could go back and you could look in the Haggadah and see all the names.
yeah. That's cool. And I was thinking of positioning it because of course not everyone there maybe grew up Jewish, maybe not everyone there is Jewish, but they still could have ancestors or family memories that they could bring in
Sure.
to that occasion. And of course our spiritual ancestors who we're going to be telling the story of. So, all right, cool. Well, thank you. Okay, so we did this last year as well, but it was slightly different. Come on now. Here we go. I have a slightly different focus this year. So we talked about the Passover Seder. So I'm going to focus on this idea of personal liberation. Could someone please unmute and read the bullets on the slide?
Mitzrayim, the Hebrew word for Egypt, means narrow place. Rabbi Nachman of Bratzlov, 1772 to 1822, said, the exodus from Egypt occurs in every human being, in every era, in every year, and in every day.
Thank you, Sue. I suspect some of you may be familiar with Reb Nachman. He was a Hasidic rabbi. His teachings are very closely aligned with Mussar, Rabbi David Jaffe. Jaffe is a kind of Bratzlov rabbi and the Mussar teacher. Um, so how does this idea of narrow place come together with this idea about each of us should experience the exodus from Egypt? What is putting those in conversation? What are they talking about? And how might that apply to us in a Mussar context? Maybe starting with a narrow place. What is a narrow place? Yeah, Toby.
Well, for me, a narrow place is anything that makes me feel like I can't handle it or feel overwhelmed.
Hmm.
There are some situations that one finds oneself in, either something that they did that created the situation or something that they didn't do that they might have done to save the situation, or something that's totally beyond our control that we just simply feel like, what am I supposed to do here? What's the next step? I'm trapped.
Hmm.
Now what? Who's going to
Yeah.
rescue me or whatever, something like that. But I find myself in those kinds of situations. I recently adopted a kitten that I had to go fly to San Francisco to pick up. And when I picked him up, he had some sort of virus. And I've been dealing with the sick kitten that I wanted so badly. And
Hmm.
there was a day when I had to make 2 trips to the vet. And I thought, I just can't. And then pick yourself up, put on the big girl pants and get
Hmm.
it done. And I think for me, the way to overcome those narrow places where you think you can't is to just say, well, okay, I'm going to put on the big girl, boy pants, person
Hmm.
pants, whatever, and just suck it up and do it. And I may not want to do it. In fact, I
Hmm.
definitely didn't want to do it. But sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. That's
Yeah.
it.
Thank you so much, Toby. Yeah, and from the Exodus story, Moses certainly didn't want to do it. He had all kinds of, reasons why he begged for the divine to pick somebody else. So, but that was his task, and he was the right person for that task, even if it didn't feel like it to him at that moment. Thank you so much, Toby. Other thoughts about the narrow place or what it might mean to you? Questions about it? Is anyone sort of puzzled about what we're talking about here? Or, yeah, Martin.
Yeah, that's what are some of the definitions of a narrow space? This,
Yeah, I think for the Kabbalists who talked about this and who kind of emphasized this connection between Mitzrayim and this idea of a narrow place or a personal narrow place, it was when we were in slavery, we had no control over our actions. And we were just very constrained. It was almost like being made to feel small. And there was just, we couldn't control when we worked. I mean, there was, oppressors trying to, killing our children. And so this idea is, some place where we might feel really small or really constrained, um, to generalize, it's like, well, I always like this type of situation is systematically making me feel constrained. Like, Um, trying to think of an example. It's like, I'm always, I don't know, I'm having trouble thinking of an example. So, um, yeah, Pete.
It's funny. I mean, maybe this is too concrete, but I've always thought of Egypt, ancient Egypt especially, as a narrow place because it's confined to the Nile River. But I
Hmm.
know that's not the point you were trying to get at.
That might be where the kind of original origin of the name
Yeah.
came from. And then the Kabbalists kind of gave it this sort of bigger spiritual context. Yeah, Sue.
Well, I was thinking of it in the context of Mussar and in the context of humility in terms of space,
Hmm.
right? So, I mean, narrow would be more like maybe not taking enough space.
Hmm.
We're little space. If you think of a narrow path, we want a bigger
Hmm.
space, and we're
Yeah,
always trying to. And the humility always keeps coming up and up in our Mussar as like a
sure.
foundational issue. So maybe we could see it in that light,
Hmm.
possibly.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, we're all kind of exploring this idea together, so there's no right or wrong answers. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I guess along,
Right.
thank you for that, Sue. I guess along those lines, the thought of constraint, thinking about how my own ego can constrain my ability to be a healthier human being.
Hmm.
I'm not even sure all the ramifications of that as the words come out of my mouth, but it just sort of seemed to
Hmm.
be there. So thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Harry.
Well, in regard to the Passover story, we were slaves in Egypt.
Hmm.
Talk about constraint,
Yeah,
no freedom.
yeah.
So I think maybe that's what that's what that relates to is the lack of freedom
Hmm.
and being constrained.
Yeah. And so as Michael's example or Toby's example had talked about what are our internal constraints that are maybe limiting our freedom. And that kind of brings us to the second quote. It's like Rabbi Nachman said, we should all experience liberation every day and every year. So liberation from what? Yeah, Sue.
When I was thinking about that with the Hummets, I want to be liberated from my fears and worries and doubts.
Mm,
That's a huge one.
yeah. I'm sorry, I can't help but thinking of a little facetious joke. I think we'd all like to be liberated from your fears, Sue. So, it's
Do it together.
yeah. Um, but yeah, thank you for sharing that. Sure. And I think many of us probably have fears and doubts that are holding us back or constraining us. Yeah, I saw you unmuted. I didn't know if you wanted to share something or if that was just uh,
That
unmuting.
was a operator error. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No worries. Yeah. So I think part of the task for today, and we'll have a little bit of a time for reflection. It's almost like it's on the opposite. It's 6 months from Yom Kippur, and I think it's another chance to kind of do a little bit of searching, and on Yom Kippur, the emphasis, okay, where have I messed up and how do I make amends? But there's also well, I haven't messed up, but maybe I haven't made the most of an opportunity. Maybe I've held myself back from doing things where, I'm not, haven't hurt anybody. Maybe I haven't even hurt myself, but I just haven't, in whatever way that might mean. I've just kind of held myself back from looking to make new friends and or held myself back from going to the gym, kind of what Michael was talking about, or held myself back from eating a little bit healthier, or who knows what. So this is just an opportunity for us to kind of maybe think expansively in that direction. Okay, let's take it a little deeper. So, okay, so Exodus occurs in every era, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of uh, summarize this kind of as an exit from our narrow place. And so I'm calling stage one like the cry. So this is relatively early in the Exodus story. There was a new Pharaoh who did not know the Israelites and didn't know Joseph and feared that they would side with their enemies. You know, this is kind of the original anti-Semite who just sort of feared this populace and different people from their midst. So could someone please read this sort of excerpt from the second chapter?
The Israelites groaned under their servitude and cried out, and God heard and remembered God's covenant with their ancestors. How was the soul trait? Okay.
Let's just, yeah, so we'll get to that in a second, but let's just talk about this idea about, you know, groaning under the servitude and crying out. So what's happening here? Sort of just in the plain meaning of the text, what's going on?
The Israelites are in pain.
Yeah. And do you think that it was new that they were in pain, or had they been, at this point, they've been slaves for 400 years? So was this a new pain, or was this maybe something they'd felt for a while?
Well, it sounds like it for a while. That's an interesting question, though. So is this the first time that they cried out?
Certainly in the narrative, it is not mentioned earlier. And I think, you know, this is where it says, and God heard their cry and remembered. And then right after that, we get the burning bush. So it seems like God heard the cry and then answered by sending Moses. So, okay. And this is one thing that the rabbis kind of focus on as kind of a big pivotal moment. And we'll look into this at a little bit more depth. But so they've cried out. So essentially, what's happening? What are they saying? Kind of like help, right? Okay, we've had enough. We are really suffering. Help us. Um, so Martin,
Could they be blaming God for their troubles?
um, I don't think so. I think they are crying out to God for help.
Okay, and how and is it possible that they would be blaming God for their troubles, or you think that's not possible?
It's certainly possible. I mean, certainly later, and you know, when we're after the liberation, they certainly blame God. You know, at least some of the people blame God for what's going on. But a lot of the people have just kind of lost touch as well. And it's not even clear they were crying out to God. They were just crying out to the universe for help, I think. You know, it just says they cried out. It doesn't say, kind of reminds me when I was my parents used to tell me this story when I was like 3. I was watching The Wizard of Oz for the first time, and I was sitting on my father's lap, and you know, the hourglass sands are running out, and it's looking really grim. And my father thought I was asleep, but then he said he heard this little voice, "Won't somebody please help that poor little girl?" You know, it's kind of like, you know, oh my God, things are really bad. Somebody helps us. So, how might humility and patience be related to crying out? And I have a couple of slides to help us explore that. So first, this idea of, how is crying out for help related to the soul trait of humility? Yeah, Sue.
Well, if you look at the slide, like too little, um, I don't think you're able to cry out. I mean, the fact of crying out means to say, I need help, and that's hard. And
Yeah.
and it's very hard to do that. And so you keep it all in, and then you don't cry
Mhm.
out.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking of. And this has come up in some of our discussions elsewhere. It's kind of hard to ask for help sometimes, you know. And then in a similar way, um, we have the slide for the spectrum of patience, and they've been slaves for 400 years. And so what happens when, we have too much patience?
I don't know about too much patience, but too little patience is certainly something I can identify with there. I mean, I feel
Mhm.
like that might be the majority of my crying out to the divine, is
Mhm.
brought about by too little patience.
Is it too little, or maybe it's just because the alternative to crying out is just sitting there and continuing to suffer?
Mhm.
I thank you for that. I think of it as too little patience because I recognize, even as I'm crying out often, that the solution is there and that all I need to do is wait for things to
Hmm.
unravel themselves.
Yeah.
So I would, in my own heart and soul, I experience it as too little patience.
Hmm. Yeah, and it may well be, and it's whatever answer is right for you. So I didn't hope it didn't come across as judgmental
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
As I read the narrative, it's like, okay, we've been slaves for 400 years, and it's just getting to be too much. Maybe it didn't, it's like you throw a frog in boiling water and it jumps right out. But if you gradually increase the temperature, it just doesn't kind of notice how bad things have gotten until it can become fatal to the frog. So, so I see this as this first step is kind of like saying, okay, it's enough. It's almost like um, my understanding of the 12-step program where you have to first admit you have a problem, or you have to say, you know what, I want to change this. This is not working for me. This is making me unhappy. This is holding me back. Um, and, thinking about my current situation here in Colorado, like things are going pretty well, but I also have a lot of inertia around just doing the stuff I'm doing. And maybe I'm not taking kind of the extra steps I need to take to kind of get out in the world and sort of meet people outside of my community. Um, kind of 6 months in. So it's like maybe that's the liberation that I need. I need to kind of, it's not quite get out of my own way, but I need to kind of take whatever next step there is to take. Um, and then, okay, so the exit for stage two, and there's only two stages. And then after this, we'll go into breakout groups. So this is after God talks to Moses, and Moses is like, don't pick me. And what if the people don't believe me? And your brother will be there. And so it says, Aaron repeated all the words that God had spoken to Moses. This is to kind of all the leaders and the people of the Israelites back in Egypt. And he performed the signs in sight of those assembled. So you may remember this was like throwing down the staff and it turns into a snake and kind of causing some scare. So he kind of does some little minor miracles. And it says, and the people were convinced. And the Hebrew, you almost, as a rule, I actually don't talk about Hebrew here, but I thought this was so interesting. Vaya'amen ha'am. And so ha'am is the people, and amen. When do we say amen?
So be it.
What's that?
So be it.
Yeah, it's kind of so be it, or we agree. It's like after, the rabbi says the prayer and everybody says amen. It's like, yep, what he said. We're on board with that. We agree. Okay, Kitty, you can head out. So I thought it was so interesting that that's kind of what the Hebrew said. Everyone's like, yes, we're on board. Okay. And then maybe someone could read the second bullet, please.
Nachum Leibowitz, Israeli Torah scholar and teacher, taught that redemption is not solely a divine act descending from heaven, but requires human initiative. She posited that individuals must actively seek and strive for their own liberation, underscoring the partnership between divine providence and human effort in the journey to freedom.
Great, thank you. So Nechama Leibowitz, what's the point there that they were making? What is she teaching?
Well, that we need to be active in our pursuit of redemption, and also it's a partnership with God.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, in theory, the people could have said, you know what, we're good. We're out. What, this little snake trick is gonna be good enough for you to take on Pharaoh? I don't think so. And I think that this was my old rabbi, Janet Martyr, said, this is the only time in the history of the Jewish people that everyone agreed on something,
I doubt it.
And we'll know the coming of the Messiah when all of the Jewish people agree that yes, this is the Messiah. So yeah, and so then the idea is, how does this relate to kind of alacrity or enthusiasm? What is it that, and I'll just put up the slide to kind of remind us of the spectrum of um, enthusiasm again. So how is this idea related to kind of personal liberation from the narrow place, being, a partnership with the divine for whatever that might mean to you, or something greater than ourselves? Um, for me, this kind of reminds me of, the point that Toby was kind of starting us out with. At some point, you just have to do it. It's like the end of the day, we need to be responsible for our own liberation, and helpers might come, but we need to get in the boat. We need to assist. We need to do our part.
I would
So
say
then
that's
let's,
especially true with our own liberation, our own,
right.
like I want to be free from those worries. That's really
Mhm.
on me
Right.
to do that. And
Yeah,
I think that's harder sometimes because it's just like a lot of work.
it sure is. Yeah, it sure is. It's easier to, get on social media and either, protest against the government or protest against the people protesting the government, but there is a place for those things, of course, but that's not the Mussar task, as I'm framing it in this context anyway. So let's take like a couple minutes to reflect. Okay, so I'm proposing that there's kind of these two steps of personal liberation, asking for help, realizing you need help, recognizing that you can't be patient anymore, and then taking action. So then think a little bit about, well, what is this kind of personal liberation that you're looking for? What is your liberation task this Passover? How could you ask for help? Is there someone you could ask for help? And then maybe like what is one small step you can take towards this liberation? We don't need to solve the whole problem, right? We want to do this in the Mussar way of taking a small step, getting our alacrity, but something I can get going on right away to address this. I'm going to leave this slide up and like you all to kind of just reflect. If you have a piece of paper, you could jot down a couple notes and then we'll go into breakout groups or groups where you can kind of discuss with your partner. All right, I'm going to open the rooms now. So you can go to a breakout room and there'll be a good, 10 minutes to kind of discuss with your partner. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. I had some interesting reflections myself, but first I would love to kind of hear what you might have come up with. If anyone want to share your personal liberation, if it's not too personal to you, or some of the things you discussed. Yeah, Sue.
Well, I personally talked about my Mitzrayim was I've had these weight challenges over the years. Used to be going up and down 10 pounds, now it's 5. But now I'm back to 10 this month because I've had a lot of issues in my life and I'm trying to get to the root of why I do this. And I did take some actions. And oh, the other thing is I stopped doing weights at the club, and I'm supposed to do that for my bone density. So I
Mm,
started back at the club doing a program where I do that. So I've got some help there. It's on the phone. They take you through it, so that's good. But we were just talking about how like I was at the Seder. We did our Seder last night, and then I'm cleaning up and my husband goes to bed, and there I am at midnight, sitting in the living room after I'm cleaning up, eating more matzah and drinking the leftover wine. And it's midnight. It's like, why am I doing this? And
mm,
I think it's sort of like a downtime, and then I
mm.
deserve it. I worked really hard,
Yeah.
and then after doing that, I'd never feel good. I was like, and then I wake up and was like, why did I drink the leftover wine?
Mm,
I didn't need it. We had a great time, but I
yeah.
tend to do that. And when I go on vacation, I drink a lot, a lot of drinks and
Mm,
wine, but it's a behavior, and it keeps coming back, and I feel
mm,
like I need to get to the root, like,
mm,
why am I doing it? And then and then the question would be, what would I do instead at midnight? Go to
mhm,
sleep? I mean, or what could I have done instead of eating
mhm,
and drinking? So there you go.
Could have watched K-pop Demon Hunters on Netflix, for example. Yes, great questions. Yeah, good self-reflection, Sue. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else care to share anything or any more general questions or thoughts that kind of came up from the reflection? And I know this is personal and private, and if people don't want to share, that's okay. Yeah, Toby.
Well, we were talking about our own personal limitations or restricted places and whatever, and got into looking at the Mussar Midot that we might be able to use to, number one, understand what it is we're actually feeling, and then to actually feel that feeling, whatever that is, and then to look at the Midot to see what Midot might we focus on to sort of counteract. That's not really the word I'm wanting to use, to cope with, maybe, but to sort of bring ourselves out of the narrow place, to sort of give us a wider perspective, maybe. Something like that.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do. Oh, so that's what you were talking about for the Nancy Weiss cards. They're the little like things that yeah, I have a set of those somewhere.
Of course you do.
I remember I moved. I don't use them regularly at all, but it could be a powerful exercise. Yeah.
What is that? This Nancy Weiss card thing?
Oh, she's a facilitator for the Mussar Institute and a friend of Alan's. And she designed these cards to help people, number one, understand what it is, what emotion they're feeling, where they are. I'm distracted, or I'm, like I was telling Michael, I have only two emotions that I recognize: terror and anger. I had no idea that there were like hundreds and thousands, perhaps, of other emotions. Anyway, these cards kind of help you. Well, what am I feeling? And you look at the cards, and it has a very good description, very short. And then it has the midot on the other side of what, I'm feeling disheartened. And then it'll give you the midot that sort of pertains to. And you go through the cards if you're feeling confused, and you go through the cards, and I find it very helpful because it kind of reminds me what I'm feeling. And maybe y'all don't need all that, but I do.
Greg, is there some way you can send us the information on that somewhere?
Well, I'm going to send it to Michael, and then I'll send it to Greg, and then he can disseminate it however he wants to.
Yeah, I don't have any information on it.
All right. Yeah, because I work there sometimes. I'll send it off.
Okay.
Well, I would just maybe invite you to send your email address to Toby.
And that's fine too, as long as I don't want to breach any, like, it's not HIPAA, but any, privacy issues with anybody.
Yeah, Pete.
Yeah, the Dalai Lama talks about happiness, and towards to talk towards Toby's points, he says first you need to recognize the emotion, give it a name. Then you need to kind of think about what's causing the emotion, and then the third thing is to develop a plan. And each of these steps brings you closer to happiness. And then you institute the plan. And then his last suggestion was be with people.
Yeah, kind of coming full circle to where we started with the Seder discussion, just being with people. And Barbara shared that, she's been going to the same group for 30 years, but it started where she didn't have a place to go and they invited her. And that's also part of the Seder tradition and the Thanksgiving tradition also, or if you see somebody who doesn't have a place to go, you invite them to kind of come and join. And sometimes it can turn into a 30-year friendship and relationship. Yeah, one of the things that I'm going to do that's part of my and I love kind of doing that plan. And I think last year we actually looked at all the midot in my book, and then thought about what we might use. Nancy's list is much more expensive. It's like extensive. It's probably dozens, of traits and emotions and things. So it's a good tool. But I just realized one of the things I'm going to do is I know there's someone who I met who's kind of into college basketball. I'm going to reach out to them and see if they want to watch the championship game on Monday. So that could be a fun thing to do. In addition to maybe going back up on meetup.com and just looking for groups that might be interesting to me. So while that is kind of it for today, we'll close the way we always do with a short meditation. So I invite you to once again close your eyes and take in a leisurely deep breath and a leisurely exhale. And focus on the light that's coming through your eyelids. This is the light of your divine spark. It's that piece of goodness that we all have inside us, a reservoir that we can tap into to help us get going, to help us take action. And it's connection to something bigger than ourselves, for whatever that may mean to you, whether that's nature or the divine. It's a reminder that we're not alone and that there are others. Everyone has this spark, this goodness that we can connect to. And that our people are out there. Some of them we already know and who are in our lives, and others we have an opportunity to get to know in the present or the future. May we all use these connections to find liberation for ourselves this year, whatever that may mean. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Chag Sameach, everyone. May you have a joyous holiday. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach,
Sameach.
everybody. Have a meaningful